Welcome back to episode 2 of the Financial Planning and Game Theory podcast. This is your host, Michael Sise. Today we're talking about Monopoly and your 401k. Monopoly is the 4th best-selling board game of all time, behind only chess, checkers, and backgammon, so it's in great company. But it seems to get a really bad rap, and I think I know why. At my house growing up, the only time we ever opened the rulebook for Monopoly was to remember how much money each player was meant to start the game with. We made our own rules up from the very beginning, and we had a blast with it. But like most, our invented rules included paying large windfalls of cash to different players throughout the game. Snake eyes, free parking, even rolling doubles twice, we were handing cash out left and right, artificially altering the economy of the game itself. The biggest issue with handing out extra money throughout gameplay in Monopoly is that you extend the duration of each game. Monopoly is designed to last about 45 minutes. Many times my family would play for hours, if not days. For the purpose of today's discussion, we are going to assume that the rules of Monopoly are actually being followed. And for those of you who have never played Monopoly by the rules, that's probably why you don't like it that much. For anyone who's studied retirement planning, you'll be familiar with the three-legged stool of retirement. For those of you who haven't, you'll be familiar with the legs of that stool. Social Security, pension plans, and personal savings. Social Security is considered currently to be under stress. The system has been borrowed against, it's overpromised benefits for years, and it's currently being underfunded during a historic wave of new retirees, the baby boomers, many of whom are living longer and receiving more income checks from the system than anticipated. The second leg is pension plans. Pensions have been closing left, right, and center over the last couple decades. In the wake of the COVID crisis, more pension plans than ever are anticipated to freeze or close due to the Fed interest rate drop in March. Many pension plans were founded in the 70s and 80s when interest rates were at all-time highs. That means that these plans were able to generate a significant safe return without taking any legitimate investment risk. These days, the exact opposite is true. Interest rates have bottomed out, and pension plans are squeezing to try to come up with any sort of safe return, and in many cases, those return figures are far too low for the plan to remain solvent over the coming decades. The third leg is personal savings. You may know this as your 403b, 457, simple, SEP, solo K, but for today's purposes, we're going to use a catch-all term, 401k, to encapsulate them all. The idea behind the 401k and other defined contribution plans is to shift the risk of the American retirement from the employer to the employee. It's now our responsibility as an employee to accumulate our own nest egg throughout our careers. There are 4 components that make the 401k such an effective saving vehicle. The first is the sizable annual contribution limit. The second is the tax deferral offered on all the investment growth within that account. The third would be the Roth provision, which can create a tax-free retirement income stream if used in the right situations. And the fourth is the employer contributions that are made into these plans on a regular basis. Those 4 combined create a powerful dynamic where if the employee chooses the correct investment lineup, they are able, in many cases, to pave the way to a great nest egg and a financially balanced retirement. Let's talk specific strategies in Monopoly. I believe the average player misunderstands the value of the properties on the board. You see Park Place and Boardwalk and even the green properties, and everybody thinks those are the best properties to own. While they do command the highest rent value, I'd encourage you to consider quantity over quality. If you were to look at a heat map of the board itself and identify the properties or spaces most likely to be landed on throughout the game, or perhaps landed on most often, we're able to identify the orange and red spaces, appropriately colored, as the hot corner. The primary reason why these spaces are so frequently landed on is because of jail. There are 4 ways that a player can land in jail in the game of Monopoly, making it the most often landed on space. It's conveniently located 6 spaces before the hot corner. The odds of rolling a 7 when 2 die are cast are 1 in 6. With that in mind, an obvious strategy is to construct houses and hotels on your properties when an opponent is 7 spaces away. Another great strategy in Monopoly is called the housing shortage. There are 32 home pieces in the game of Monopoly, the little green ones. By rule, when the 32nd home is deployed on the board, no one else can buy a house, at least until some of those houses become available again. A legitimate strategy is to box your opponents out of being able to build more houses by keeping 4 homes on as many of your properties as possible. This creates a scarcity of resources that will penalize your opponents and allow you to take advantage. Early game and late game strategy in Monopoly is key. Early in the game, the last place you want to be is jail. The more rolls you take and the more times you move around the board, the better likelihood you have of landing on those spare unpurchased properties. Late in the game, there's no place sweeter than being in jail for 3 turns. When there's hotels left and right around the board and it's like landmines throughout, staying in jail protected and collecting some checks while your opponents land on your properties is a pretty great way to play. Let's talk 401k strategy next. The most basic concept applicable here is the idea of compound interest. That's the idea that your money is creating more money, that you're being paid to invest. Most applicably, dividends and capital gain distributions come to mind here. Both are common within 401k investments. Dollar cost averaging is second. Dollar cost averaging is the idea that you commit to a monthly contribution or deployment amount in which you each month buy the same amount of dollars worth of whatever investments you're purchasing in the plan. This creates a steady and oftentimes lower average price over time that offers significant upside as the years go by. The next one's pretty straightforward. The loan provision in the 401k is a dangerous thing. This is a unique opportunity for you to borrow against your own assets and pay yourself the interest on that loan without really costing yourself a whole lot at first glance. That being said, I want to focus on the second glance. What you're doing by borrowing against that plan is committing to an amortization schedule of payments so that each contribution that you were making before, each dollar cost average installment, let's say, is now spoken for. It has to go to pay back the interest and the principal of that loan. Additionally, there's often origination fees and sometimes ongoing maintenance fees for 401k loans. It's not that it isn't a great option in a pinch. I would argue, however, that the loan provision is oftentimes misused when people go in and borrow money. It's one thing when you have a real bind or a life event. It's something else when you buy a truck. Next, we'll discuss the idea of the Roth contribution. The beauty of the Roth is that every dollar that goes in and every dollar earned on that money could come out tax-free if you play by the rules. So let's assume you wait until retirement age, 59 and a half, and you've contributed Roth throughout your career, and those contributions have exponentially grown. You could have a sizable nest egg of completely tax-free income waiting for you in retirement. That is a tremendous opportunity. Unfortunately, however, the Roth didn't exist until 1998. So many baby boomers were really not afforded the opportunity to maximize their Roth option. They were already in their peak earning years by the time the Roth provision was introduced, especially within the 401k space. Today, however, The opportunities I find most interesting for Roth would be a young individual who anticipates an increased income throughout their career or who buys into long-term investment growth potential. The Rule of 72 suggests that if your money averages a 7.2% rate of return over a 10-year period, your investment will double over that time. A quick example, a $10,000 investment today that achieves that 7.2 rate of return for the next 3 decades will be worth $80,500 and change. To pay tax on that sum now might cost a couple $1,000s or so for the average employee. To pay tax on that in the future, however, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars for the average American retiree. That is the significance of choosing Roth versus traditional. If we do achieve investment growth, especially for an individual with 2, maybe 3 decades of employment ahead of them, every single contribution dollar that they put in throughout their career has the ability and opportunity to grow. Every penny of growth can be tax-free if the Roth is utilized appropriately. So now let's bridge the gap and draw a couple parallels between monopoly strategy and 401k. I'm a huge proponent of early aggression in both endeavors. Early in the game of Monopoly, I buy almost every property that I land on. I'll buy from my opponents if they give me the option. I attempt to win the game quickly or at least achieve a strong position as fast as I can that will give me a better likelihood of sealing the deal. With the 401k, I'm of the opinion that early in a career, an individual should be contributing to the Roth 401k if there's an implication of longevity in their career or significant investment growth throughout that time. Late game strategy is different. In Monopoly, once all the properties are owned and developed, it's time to tighten up, to become more tactical and intentional with each decision. It's important to utilize any shelter you might achieve, like free parking or jail, to your own benefit. Investing heavily into developing your properties when you may not be able to afford landing on an opponent's is awfully risky. I usually try to play it safe. Within a 401k, the same idea applies. The final 5 years of a career are known as the beginning of the defining decade. That's the 5 years that conclude your career and the 5 years that you begin your retirement with. Many, many decisions and lifestyle choices are made during that time that will have a tremendous impact on your long-term retirement direction. I generally see this as a great opportunity to reassess your investment risk as you begin down that defining decade, making sure that you're not taking any undue risks that could compromise or erode a significant chunk of your treasured nest egg right before you retire. At the end of the day, Monopoly and 401k have many similarities, but are ultimately wildly different. I enjoy talking about both, as you can tell by the topic choice of this podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening to me talking about both. And if you have any questions or opinions that you might like to add, I'd be thrilled to hear them. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.
The opinions of the hosts and guests of this podcast are for general informational purposes only and are not to be construed as specific advice or recommendations for any individual. You should consult with a qualified financial professional to determine what is appropriate for you. The advisors of CFS Inc. offer securities and advisory services through Cetera Advisors, member FINRA SIPC. Cetera Advisors is under separate ownership from any other named entity.